Good afternoon and welcome to the first in a series of Social Work Pathways Initiative panels sponsored by the Action Lab for Social Justice. I am Dr. Ovita Williams, Executive Director of the Action Lab for Social Justice and instructor at the Columbia School of Social Work. We have a lot of folks signed on today from many parts. I'm in New York City on Lenape-Hoking, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Lenape nations on which we're here and learning and teaching and organizing. Thank you for joining us, and I do hope you'll leave with some information and connections towards your own doctoral trek. The Action Lab for Social Justice is a student-driven center committed to change, focused on Black and Brown communities, communities of color, and many communities that have been historically and systematically oppressed. To that end, the Action Lab is in its third year, and it's propelled by student voices at the helm. You can find us online at actionlab.socialwork.columbia.edu. So today, funded through the New York Community Trust, the Social Work Pathways Initiative at the School of Social Work creates opportunities for Black, Indigenous, students of color, and students who experience economic disadvantages to complete their MSW, and if desired, apply to doctoral programs. I want to thank MSW second year intern T&I Wren and Action Lab coordinator and Columbia School of Social Work alum, Erin Kim, along with our colleagues Mary Downs and Josephine Tattle for assistance in organizing this panel. And we'll be here to monitor the chat and Q&A and provide tech support. We are taping the event, which will be available on the Columbia Social Work website in the coming weeks, so look out for that. So I'm happy to introduce our four speakers, panelists who have such rich experiences and are first generation and people of color in PhD program currently at the School of Social Work. When we were first thinking about a discussion on getting to the PhD, we knew how important it would be to center people of color narratives. The numbers of BIPOC and First-gen doctoral candidates are low, and completing a program is even lower. But ways to increase that number is to do this: share knowledge, pass on wisdom, and form a community of networking and seeing ourselves represented like we're doing today. What I found when I was in the doctoral program, that peer support was so important, and also demystifying the process by sharing valuable lessons learned and knowledge gained, and some of the ways to shatter that ceiling. So I'm going to talk less and turn it over to our panelists. I want you to meet Yi Sun, who's a second year doctoral student whose research interest lies in the development and implementation of culturally grounded interventions with a focus on mental health among ethnic minority children and adolescents in rural areas. Ash Cole graduated from the School of Social Work Master's Program in 2022 and is a current first-year doctoral student. His primary research interest examines the relationship between the mental health of young Black boys, improvement in physical and social well-being, and academic achievement. Kevonyah Edwards is also a social worker and clinical supervisor, and in her second-year doctoral student program with research in overall well-being of formerly incarcerated Black men. And Oscar Gilberto Jimenez-Solomon is in the third year of the doctoral program, and Oscar's doctoral research aims to better understand how income poverty, material hardship, and psychological distress reinforce one another, and the role that racial ethnic identification plays in these dynamic relationships. So I want to thank Oscar and Yi and Kevonyah and Ash for being here today. We did have Dr. Heidi Allen was supposed to be on the panel as well, who identifies as a first gen, was unable to join today, feeling under the weather, but we're going to have another panel or two in the spring where you'll get to meet Dean Allen. So full bios of our panelists will be made available to you, I think in the chat. I think Tina is going to drop it in the chat. All right, so let's get started. We're going to be really chit-chatting with each other today, sharing a wealth of information. I want to start with this question for you all. What sparked your interest in getting a PhD in social work? And while you're like answering, if you could just tell a little bit more about whatever you want to share about your path. But like, what sparked your interest? And I think we'll start with Kevonyah.
Hello, thank you all for having me today on this panel. I'm really excited to be able to speak, especially for my first-gen peeps, because that is very important part of my identity. So what really sparked my interest in pursuing a PhD, it was really the gap that I seen while in practice. I worked in practice for about 6 years before I returned back to get my PhD, 2 years post my MSW, and really realized that there was a disservice being done to the Black men that I was serving within the jail-based setting, providing substance abuse treatment, that there were just disparities, blatant disparities that I couldn't address just being a practitioner, and knowing that there had to be some type of system change, understanding that a lot of it is evidence-based practice. And so what's the best way to change something is to go ahead and create the evidence that will influence how they're being impacted. So that's really what sparked me to get a PhD.
Thank you. Ash, what about you?
Peace, peace, beautiful people. Well, good afternoon, good day whenever you're watching this recording. Thank you for having us, Dr. O. Appreciate it. But I guess I'm going to go into story time, I suppose. But mine goes back to when I was an undergrad. I was taking an Intro to Urban Studies class at Queens College with Dr. Takeall. I was getting over-tallied into the class, so going up, like leading to go to the class, I didn't know he was the professor at the time, but we're standing outside the classroom, we're chit-chatting, we're talking, he's a brother, has long locks. So we're just like, really just talking and enjoying our time before the class starts. And I'm just like saying all this stuff. I'm like, man, I hope this professor doesn't come late. I hope this class isn't this, that, and the third. And we're just, having this conversation. He's just, buying into it and just talking and laughing. So we walk into the classroom. I go to have a seat. He goes to the lectern. And I'm like, wait a second, is that the professor? So he starts the class. He said, hey, I'm Dr. Takeall. And then he just starts talking. And that was like the first time I connected with someone that had their PhD. And I remember just watching him and looking at him, representation matters. So I'm looking at this guy teaching with jeans and Tim's on. He has long locks. He's just, unapologetically him. And it was at that moment I was like, you know what? I could do it. It was something I always wanted to do, but I never saw anyone that showed up that kind of looked like me, talked like me. And it was at that moment that I knew, I was like, you know what? I'm going to pursue this PhD, and I don't have to go and I don't have to shave my head. I don't have to, wear a suit and tie and the jacket and all this other stuff. I can come here and still speak in the vernacular and teach people at a high level. So that was what sparked my interest in getting a PhD, just seeing him. And there's another story also with my son, but we only have an hour, so I won't do the rest.
Thank you, Ash. Representation matters. I love that. How about you, Yi?
Thank you for having me today. I'm very appreciative to have this chance to be here to share my experience. And thank you, Kevonyah and Ash, to hear your story. I've never had enough of that. So what sparked my interest? So actually, I used to hate this question out loud because I got asked of this question all the time when I was applying for PhD. But over the past year, I've been reflecting on this question as well. And I think for me, my sparkles are very deeply rooted in my passion and for developing social work in rural areas in China, and also my longing for knowledge and that constant, curiosity to question this society. So I think most of my sparkles are rooted in a combination of my practice, educational, and research experiences. But it's more about my personal practice and research experiences that had shaped my pathway to today. So personally, I think as a survivor of complex childhood trauma and domestic violence, I bear the pain and the struggles across my whole developmental trajectory of those traumatic events. And I didn't have the chance to receive any intervention, any help. So that makes me to realize I always ask, what if I have had the chance to get some help, to have the chance to see a therapist, to attend even just an after school program, that would be wonderful. So this is like my first hint to start to think about the needs for intervention. And then it goes along to the practice. After my BSW, I started to practice in a rural village, and I work with African minority children, about like over 300 of them in a very rural and mountainous region in China. And these opportunities allow me to see the intersection of very complex social problems, like how the social, cultural, economic, political, and environmental factors all get together to shape and to affect the mental health well-being of children in rural areas. So that made me to start wonder, how are these factors shaped by the society, and how can we target them and target these children, and what can we do? So that lead me to the US to pursue my education, and it's a very long pathway. I've been in this field for over 10 years, so long. And then I became a research associate for an intervention research project at the University of Michigan, where I was able to participate in the development, testing, evaluation, and then the tailoring phase of cognitive behavioral therapy program that's internet-based. And this program just make me to understand the need to develop tailored intervention for the targeted population, especially for those who are really hard to reach or homebound. So I think they all together, they make me to reach the stage that, oh shit, oh shoot, I want, no, sorry, English is not my first language. That's my excuse. Oh shoot, I want a PhD, that's what I want to do. So here I am. Thank you, and I'm sorry again.
No apologies necessary. I love it. You were getting into it. Absolutely. It is so personal. It is like so personal, right? Our journeys here, and the weaving road there, I think, is such the richness to this. So thank you, Yi. Oscar, what do you got to share for us?
Well, since English is not my first language either, now I can say a lot more than I was hoping to say. I'm very grateful to be here. I'm Oscar. Thank you, Dr. Williams and the Action Lab for Social Justice. That's what I understand the full name is, which is what motivated me to be here. Much needed social justice, not only in the world, but also within the schools of social work. And I'm glad that Columbia and this Columbia School of Social Work is committed to that. Because it takes very purposeful and intentional effort to promote social justice within our own disciplines and within PhD programs. And I think that's what this Action Lab is about, at least this panel and this effort to actually bring justice to also access to post-secondary education. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity, because I'm benefiting from that. And it's good to hear about other people's stories, but there's a lot more to do and a lot more opening doors that need to happen for other people that may be able to come after us, and maybe hopefully some of our experiences can be helpful in that. So what I was actually thinking about is that for me, the question of like what sparked my interest really is like very intertwined with why a PhD in social work, why a PhD in social work at Columbia, and why now, like all of those together. So I'll try to very briefly to tackle all those four different things. I mean, why a PhD in general? Very connected to what I've been doing during the work I've been trying to do the last 15 years. I have always been interested in academic research, but that was applied. And so I've spent years in academia, academic research that was actually applied in sociology, public health, back in Peru, where I grew up and where I went to undergraduate school, and then here in the US after I got my master's. But this is where the reality of lives, I think, is important, and for me is really been important in the timing also of when I'm able to actually pursue this in life, and is that when I finished my master's about a year later, I became undocumented, and for the better part of 10 years, I really couldn't work in an academic center, and I had to work in jobs that where I was unemployed or underemployed, and that a lot of that was actually service-based work, which is also something that I appreciated, but it actually forced me in many ways to have more experience working directly with people. And so when I was able to get back on a path to be able to pursue a job and have documents to be able to do that, I was able to actually get a job fairly quickly in a research position, which is where I've been in the last 10 years, pretty much. But really, the PhD, just general, like why a PhD in general, is that I have a few years ago I realized I had reached the place of what I could do without a PhD, without the credentials, without the recognition, without the credentialing, and for me to be able to get another level of grants and be able to actually work more independently, a PhD was just necessary. Why social work? I think mainly because I'm coming to realize now that it feels like a broad enough home for me to I see social work as a very integrative kind of discipline that is kind of integrating different, it allows for different social sciences and methods to actually come together to better understand and also try to change social problems and to make a difference. And I've always had a sociology heart, but with an interest in mental health and public health. Both research, but also change and technologies for change, developing interventions. And it seems like social work was like the best home for me to pursue all those different interests, and which to me are part of like a package that I believe is important. And academic programs on sociology or even public health didn't seem like, or other disciplines didn't seem like they would provide that broader home to be able to do that. And why Columbia? I think specifically because I felt that the more I learned about it, the more that the Columbia School of Social Work had really a very good combo and balance between those emphases in rigorous research, but also commitment to change, and also research-based intervention development to develop interventions on policies that can actually effect meaningful change. And why now? Because if I don't do it now, it's not going to happen. I actually I started my PhD in my 40s, and I'm glad to have that opportunity now. I think that's something that is important when we talk about issues of social justice, that there are many people that have had lives, have to actually deal with life, especially among Black, Brown, and other marginalized communities. And I think we need to create more opportunities for people with different experiences, different age groups, different gender identities, and racial, ethnic identification, etc. So I'm glad to be part of that, and glad to be part of this dialogue.
Thank you so much, Oscar. You said so much. All of you said so much. And, I'm trying to think what direction to go in. And, I think the point you made about like in your 40s, like I was in my 40s when I started the PhD, and it took me 8 years, and, it was always a nagging thing, but I didn't know much about it. That's why today we really wanted to talk about like demystifying it all. Like, what is this thing? What is research? Am I a researcher? Can I be a researcher? What that I wanted to kind of hear from you all, that when it was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this, but you didn't come to that, right? Like in any, it was a path, right? So like I looked at several programs. I was like, I'm not taking the GRE. I've been took the SAT when I was in high school. That all of these myths that we hear about like getting down that path, what are some that you want to share that you've learned, right? That yes, you're not too old, or you don't have to have necessarily written 20 papers, that what your mentors look like. Like, what is it for you was the thing that really said, I can do this? Or what are some things you want to share that you learned along the way that you wish you'd known? All right, this time I'm going to start with Yi. I'm going to move it around.
Dr. I just want to make sure I understand the question. Is for what are the things that we wish we'd know?
Yeah. Or what are some of the myths that now you know something different about? Yeah.
Oh, I can keep on going. So I guess the first thing is actually to realize that the PhD program as a doctoral student is a very, very long journey. So in the end, so in the end, I feel like I'm always alone. Although I appreciate all the support I get from my cohort, my mentor, and all the faculty here at Columbia. But in the end, it's you and your own research and your own work that are constantly accompanying you along the way of this PhD program. So I think it's very important to realize that this is a very huge commitment, and to really understand that is PhD something you actually want? Because you're gonna end up being so alone, and yeah. And the second thing is actually to think about that question, back to that question, what actually sparkled my interest in getting a PhD social work? This is to make me realize that in a PhD program, it's very important to know what I value the most in terms of why do I join this program? What I am doing PhD for? Am I doing this for production? Am I doing this to just get a faculty job or for a career? Or am I just doing this because I hold this passion for knowledge and to pursue my research interests, and I don't care about publication or funding or other things? So it's to figure out what you value the most, and then get grounded in yourself in all these values you hold, so that in this program you won't, in your PhD journey, you won't be too, I don't know how to say, but too affected by all other factors out there. Yeah, that's the main two things. Thank you.
Thank you, Yi. I do want to come back to later on to like, you got to know why, because at the lowest of lowest moments, you'd have to go back to, why did I do this? And kind of have that posted somewhere. Kevonyah.
Yeah, so something that I wish that I had known. Well, one thing being a first-gen student, I didn't know that there are a lot of PhDs that are funded, right? And so, especially if you are like at Columbia School of Social Work, I'm sure you're paying thousands of dollars to get your MSW, right? But it wasn't until I talked to one of my professors in my MSW program, and she said, you shouldn't have to pay for your PhD. And that was like, oh, I can pursue this a lot quicker than I thought I could. I thought I had to like save up some money to and work in order to do this. And she's like, no, especially with the shortage of social work PhDs that there are, she's like, you shouldn't have to pay for a PhD. And so then I was like, oh, well, let me get on it. And then what Dr. O talked about the GRE. So one thing I didn't know, and don't think that just because you got your MSW, you have to get a PhD in social work. There are so many other options, but I decided to get my PhD in social work. And there was a website, the GADE website, GADE, that outlined every single PhD and DSW program in social work. And I literally went through and I was like, which ones do I need? Which schools don't I need a GRE for? Because I'm not taking a GRE. Which schools have professors or programs that fit my interest with the criminal legal system? And so I started to select schools there. The representation, what Ash talked about before, was super important. Hence, yeah. And I knew certain programs, like I knew like, oh, I wanted to go to a HBCU, but then I also knew I didn't want to get into debt to get a degree either. And so that was kind of out of it because they didn't offer the same amount of funding that these predominantly white schools will provide. And so it's really finding that process, well, understanding that it is a process, right? Dr. O's kind of talked about that. The process doesn't start with like, oh, I'm gonna get it. Like it starts way before you even get here with deciding what type of school you want to go to, what you want to research. And I think what E said when she talked about staying true to who you are, that's something that that is my mission while pursuing my PhD. Who am I and what are my interests? And I know that I'm grounded no matter what my research question is, which will be, it's always ever evolving, ever changing. Like my research interest or my research question today is not the same as yesterday. And being okay that knowing that this whole thing is a process. Like by the time you finish this, that's not your life's work. You still have so much work to do, and understanding that this is just a process of getting there. I think that is like, I feel like we have to come into this program and be a full package. Like we have to know but really it's that question of why am I doing this that will keep me going, which is really important, and just feeling out the process and not needing to be a well fit package right now.
I love that. The why part of it. And, as you all continue to talk, like interjecting, like, what is your why? What is your why for this? And you talked about the process, even being like on this webinar right now is a part of that journey, that process, like taking advantage of these kinds of, he's like, you might not do an application immediately, but you're like thinking about it. You're talking to people, you're finding out, you're on Google, what program, that's all a part of it and not a final destination. I love how you said that. Thank you. Oscar, for you, some tidbits.
Yeah, I'm gonna preface what I'm gonna say by saying that I usually pay a lot of attention to like the structural stuff that gets in people's way, but this is one area where I do want to talk about like I don't know, for just to oversimplify maybe the internal work like I feel like I've had to do and I have to continue doing to build my own agency to be able to do this and to get out of my own way. And so very practical things like certainly getting as much information as I could about the programs. And also, I heard this actually, a colleague say something like this, like imagine how an empowered heterosexual white male might actually navigate this and what they would actually ask for. Like, and I hope this doesn't offend anyone. And what I mean by that is that there's so many reasons why internally I actually have felt like I didn't belong. So So what would they ask? You know, like, hey, you know what? Actually, I would ask for like, can I meet with a professor? Can I actually? I'm gonna send an email saying that I'm interested in this. I'm gonna say in the application they ask you who would you like to work with, and the person that I was thinking about was someone who was like among the most senior out of the entire faculty, and part of my brain was saying I will never be matched with that person because I'm not enough, because I actually don't have the pedigree of the academia that I imagined that is what they were looking for. But actually, that's not how it turned out. Actually, I was matched with them and I've learned a lot from them. And so just constantly having to check that out, imposter syndrome all the time, like still every day. I'm writing some, helping, you know, I'm co-writing a paper right now. I'm dealing with it like right before we hang up, right now, like, you know, like they would know how to do this better, you know, this other person that has this idea of what their perfect academic path would be. And so acknowledging and being able to actually do that internal work to recognize what I do bring to the equation. There's a lot of experience that I bring to the equation. My lived experience in multiple areas does bring a lot to the work that we do in research. And that I visited a conference recently in Europe, and they have this term that in mental health here, we talk about people with lived experience. I heard this term, experts by experience there. And I actually think it's a very powerful term because it actually not only applies to people who have experience in mental health, but also being experts by experience in immigration and poverty and struggle and other forms of suffering that actually enriches any academic environment. So whatever that expert by experience you are, there's a place for that in a school like the School of Social Work at Columbia. And I'm pretty confident in many other schools, this doesn't have to be the only choice for you. But being able to recognize that is a daily struggle for me. And I imagine that is a daily struggle for many other people. So I would encourage anyone to actually, you know, certainly do the outer work, but also do some of the inner work to see to what extent I can, you know, really build my agency to push the structural limitations that are out there, because really both are needed.
Yeah, and I think many of you already talked about that inner work, those voices that keep saying, can you, should I keep going? Are they going to listen to me? Am I being heard? That inner work is so important in this journey. Ash, what about you?
I'll go ahead and start with my why, because I believe my why is kind of what keeps me going. It's funny you mentioned that, Doctor. A couple, like maybe a week or two ago, I'm like, this is so early for me to thinking like, why am I doing this? But I think about my family, right? So in my extended family, I'm the youngest out of 8 children. I'm the only male in my family to complete an education higher than a high school. The first, graduate of my family as it pertains to graduate degrees and so forth. So I think about that. I think about my dad only having a 6th grade education. I think about my mom barely making it through high school. And, that's the reason why, I know that this has to happen. In addition to that, I have 2 children, one not so small, the other one small. They're also the reason why I show up the way I do. But so I have my son, Ash the third, and I think about that, and I think about the importance of when someone hears his name, knowing that his father did something that was meaningful. And then I have my daughter Joy, same thing with her, and knowing that because she's younger, that she'll never really kind of understand this process. She'll see me as kind of being completed at that point in time, and what that would do for her and her upbringing, and how it would be much different than mine for both of my children. And then I think about my wife and the sacrifices that she has to make and the adjustments that we have to make together in order to make this possible. So, although having all that together can be a mess and can be messy, but it's my guiding light. It's the reason why I show up and the reason why I know that this has to happen, this has to be done. So, and to answer the other question, the same professor, Dr. Takal, I remember I spoke with him after a couple of classes. I was kind of shy about it, and I was like, I thought about doing a PhD. Talking to him and like, how would you think that would work out? And he told me, he said, "Can you read?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." He's like, "Can you write?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Do you like to write?" I was like, "Depends on the day." He was like, "Sounds like a perfect candidate." you know, because if you can read and you can write and you struggle to write, you can get your PhD. So that was the thing that kind of like affirmed for me initially. Then after that, you know, the conversation I had with you, Dr. O, when we first met a while back during the pandemic. I always tell the story when Dr. O and I, when we spoke, it was like two cousins that hadn't seen each other at the family reunion. It was supposed to be an hour conversation, but we ended up talking for many hours. But after that, we had email exchanges afterwards, and it was always kind of like, you know, confirmation affirming. And I was fortunate enough to speak to people that kind of affirmed what it is that I wanted. Because prior to that, so often when I would tell people things that I wanted to achieve academically, I kind of would get laughed at or like, you know, you might want to do something else, you know? So I believe it was all those things that kind of propelled me to this moment and propelled me to this place. And, you know, that and speaking to other now colleagues within the program, that when I was that first year, you know, first semester MSW student asking for a meeting because I just wanted to know. And that also goes to ties into being first generation. Sorry about that. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I think when people ask the question of what would you do differently, I think for me I was so naive and I was so used to hearing no all the time anyway. It didn't bother me to ask these questions. So I always tell people, I think that was the thing that made the process for me a little bit easier because I didn't know what to ask and didn't what not to ask. So I was already used to people laughing me out the room or not taking me seriously. So I just asked the question. I'm like, at this point, they're going to tell me yes, they're going to tell me no. Either way, I'm ready for it. So I think that would be is something I wouldn't do differently. I love it because it got me to this point. So I would, you know, charge you all with that same attribute to just be. Don't be afraid of the no's. Don't be afraid of the yeses. You know, just kind of ask the questions however it is on your mind and be unapologetic about it. But other than that, I don't think there's anything else that I would change differently. I would just tell people to do that because I think that, you know, it got me pretty far.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I know we have questions coming in already. Every one of you, you are committed to justice, and your research topics show that, right? And so your commitment and, you know, is related to who you are a lot, and, you know, what those interests are. How are you bringing your voice? How are you bringing your voice, your passions, your experiences, your lived experiences to a space, right, that traditionally ignores our voices, doesn't value our voices? And I think this is like speaking back in imposter syndrome and all of that. But like, how are you centering and finding ways in this world to say what you want to say, be who you want to be, speak about the people you want to talk about, write in the way you want to write, you know, like what has been that for you? And I'll go back and start with Ash on that.
Okay. So I guess I kind of go back to what I was saying initially, and it was just kind of like seeing Dr. Take All, and then just again, just knowing myself, just kind of being grounded in yourself, who you are personally. I believe that's the key. The beautiful thing about the PhD, I know, you know, Oscar's talked about, you know, being a non-traditional student of sorts. Typically, people would like put these things in ages, and you also mentioned this too, Dr. O. And you know, myself being a non-traditional student, I think it's important to have a sense of identity when you come into a program, especially being BIPOC, especially being first gen, and just kind of like riding that wave, you know? So when people come to class, they may show up dressed a certain kind of way. I got on the Nike tech suit. That's just kind of how I go. And knowing that, you know, because of that, you're making it so that it's attainable for people. You know, I mean, for the other folks on the outside looking in, because they can show up as themselves and, you know, and present this work because it's all cognitive, really, at the end of the day. And again, not being afraid to talk to people, having a little bit of a life experience, and also being able to communicate in a way that's compelling, I think is important as well. But again, I actually sometimes on purpose try to do things that are non-traditional just to kind of like push back against it. And when I write, I try to do like a creative academic writing. Whereas, typically if you read an article, it's kind of stale, but that's just not how I am. That's not kind of how I move. So when I talk a certain kind of way. So I try to have my writing mimic that way. And I think it's important to do that for a number of reasons. One, because the outreach, because we all have a target group that we want to reach, and they all speak a different language. And most of the time, that language is not academic, it's not coming from the ivory tower. So again, in order to reach the people, we have to be of the people. So I think we need to represent that in the way we walk, and the way we talk, and the way we present ourselves in the classrooms and the meetings, and to kind of push back, like T and I had mentioned earlier in the chat about professionalism. When you think of professionalism, is it really making someone else feel comfortable? Because to me, professionalism is showing up in a way that's, polite and respectful, right? Whereas other folks may see it a certain way, like being professional may be like, you got to wear this type of outfit, or you got to kind of come at this, you got to approach it a certain kind of way, or your hair can't be this way or that way. For me, if I'm respectful and I'm polite and I'm making sure I'm, being mindful of the people that are in the room, I feel like that's enough for me to be professional. And everything else, you just gotta take it as it is. So I think that's something that I kind of do. I hope I answered the question. I feel like I may have went off in a tangent a bit
What
back
I
there,
heard is show up
but
as you are. That's what I heard. I said
yeah,
show up
and
as
be
you
grounded who you
are
are.
and be proud and be there. Absolutely. How about you, Yi?
I struggle with this a lot because I came from another culture, and also as someone who was raised in a very conservative family with very conservative parents, and also in this environment that my identity, for example, like as ethnic minority, or my identity as a member of the LGBTQAI community, these are all sort of shift for me to hide them for a very, very long time. So I think for me, it's more like first start with a self-exploration and then learning. It's to really, after I came here, I started to jump out of my comfort zone. I was pushed out of my comfort zone actually, to start really reflect on what part of my identity as Asian, but as ethnic minority, all these multiple identities bring me, and what do I have to offer in this world, in this academy. And also I think it's connected with the constant reflection on my own positionality, because throughout these years in the US, I always feel like am an outsider all the time as a Asian female, and being here studying something that's not popular and doing something that's not popular. It's just very hard. It's a constant struggle for myself. So it's more like the learning process for me and the reflection process for me. But this semester, like this year, I think I see some changes in me. I get more courage, and I really appreciate all my cohort and my senior cohort, like everyone here. I appreciate the courage they give me and the safe space they provided for me all the time. So I started to do very simple things to let my voice being heard, like simple things like I don't follow along the rules anymore. I don't think about, yes, it's in a class, it's in in academia, so I have to say very certain things, like I want publication, I want production to please my mentor, to please everyone. No, I don't want to do that, and I have the courage to say no, that's not what I am pursuing. And even just simple things to to just voice out, point out when someone was like projecting microaggression on me. I had the courage to say something back and to point out and to question them. So it's more about starting with simple things, but also learning the whole time.
Thank you so much, Yi, for just like showing that transition for you and what it's been, and you getting shout outs in the chat. Take up the space. I love Asana, what Asana's saying. But that was so beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oscar, Kevonyah, you want to add anything else? And then we're going to open it up to some Q&A.
I think I really just want to piggyback off of what Ash and he said. It's being authentically myself, and I think I did struggle with wanting. Can you guys hear that loud motorcycle in the back? Oh, okay, because I can hear it, and it's like driving me crazy. Just showing up authentically. Like, of course, I look like a social worker today, right, with my little cardigan and my sweater, but I'm able to come to class and you'll see me because I'll throw on like shoes are my thing. So I'm always in like a hoodie and some sneakers or just understanding that there's a reason that I'm here, right? I want to be here to be representation for someone else who wants to be in this position as well. And understand that you can do this and you don't have to fit into this Ivy League mentality. Oh my gosh. That probably was my hardest thing of like, you're going to go to Columbia and it's an Ivy League and all these, and I'm just like, yeah, but I don't care about any of that. I'm coming to do the work for my people. And this is going to be the best place for me to get what I need to get out of it. But I still have to always remember like the clients that I'm doing this for, my family that I'm doing this for, and just being authentically myself. Because that's when I have the most joy. I remember my first year, I was so miserable trying to conform to what I thought academia was or should be or what it was projected on by this program because I didn't see anybody that looked like me. I didn't. I fought so hard to get asked to come to Columbia just because I was like, I need to see somebody that looks like me. So that I can feel comfortable. But let me tell you, I talk so much. I make sure my voice is heard, especially in the classroom. I'm not afraid to say that I don't know or I'm confused or this doesn't make sense. Like I am one, and I say stuff just to trigger people's reaction anyway. So all of that is just, it allows me to feel comfortable in these spaces.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I could say about this. I'm going to try to keep it brief. Maybe I could say that I sometimes how I think I navigate this challenge of bringing my own voice is really not necessarily or always out of a sense of self-confidence or even feeling like all the time that what I have to say is needs to be heard, etc. Sometimes actually, and this is the one angle maybe I'm going to add to what my colleagues are saying is sometimes really I bring it because I feel like it's my duty to bring it, like out of a sense of there are experiences that are not and voices that are not heard or spoken about enough in academia. I feel like I can convey some of those experiences sometimes, and sometimes I don't feel like necessarily people want to hear it, but I feel like I'm the one in the room that has to say it. So I look around, I'm like, okay, evidently no one's going to talk about why it's important to bring people with lived experience and mental illness to the table, because everyone is talking clinician, economist, all great, but very partial views of what mental health really is about. So someone needs to say it. And I guess I look around the room and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm the one who has to say it. And sometimes it feels uncomfortable, but I'm just like, okay, whatever, and then I realized, surprisingly, like people look around like, oh, you know what, actually, I'm glad you brought this up. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right. Sometimes I will get the validation and sometimes I won't, but that helps me sometimes to just say, okay, I'm not sure that I feel confident that this is something that people want to hear, but I decided not to be a revolutionary when I was in my teenage years, and I joined some more radical movements. I actually, this is my way of making little changes. Hopefully, sometimes in a classroom, sometimes writing a paper, sometimes talking about a research question, or talking about a new program, or advocating for a new grant, or whatever the thing may be, and that helps me to get myself out of the way.
Excellent. I want to thank you all. We can go on and on and on. I took so many notes myself. I want to open it now to our audience, and I know T and I's got some questions for you all. So T and I, jump in.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. O, and thank you all so much for sharing your stories with us. It is so inspiring to hear all of these intimate personal stories, and like hearing about your passion and the important work that you're doing for populations that are dear and close to our hearts. Beautifully told stories, and we have a couple questions in the Q&A pod. So I believe Ash already answered a couple, and I'm going to be showcasing the answers if folks can't see. So Sarah asked that as POCs who don't always have the traditional white American family structure and often have more family responsibilities, could you share insight on how you have navigated that if that applies to you? And they would like to have this question directed to panelists, particularly those who have kids.
I don't have any children, but I had a lot of family responsibilities that I left behind back home in Ohio. And so that was a decision. Like, I didn't go off to school for undergrad or my master's program because I had family obligations. And so this was something that I couldn't pursue my PhD until I felt that it was an appropriate time for my family, for me to be away, because I was one of those rocks of the family. And so it was something that I had to deal with, and I had to like go to therapy about leaving my family, and making sure that they were okay at the time, making sure my sisters and my mother were okay, and not being that support that I wanted to do. I couldn't have done this before I started the program. And so with COVID and how life was happening and stuff was starting to settle, that's when I decided to do that. But that's definitely one of those things where you have to have that conversation with your family, have that conversation and let them know, like, hey, I'm embarking on this journey and I have to show up in a different way. So this is how I can show up now. And it's not going to be, I can't provide as much support that I was able to provide previously, because I'm now on this journey for all of us in the end. We're all going to win from this in the end, but I got to take a step back.
Maybe I'll just add, I don't have kids either. I relate to having other family responsibilities. I was just typing in the chat, but I'm just going to say that my father passed away during my first semester, and I had to continue working part-time, and I've been doing that since, because I'm partially responsible for supporting my mother, and that's made it certainly very challenging, very real sometimes. You know, like sometimes I wish I had more time to read and to take advantage of research opportunities. But that's just the only way I can do it right now. And I imagine that many other people have to make big sacrifices with their time and resources to be able to do this. That's a reality of things. And that's imagine something that is in many people's minds and thinking about a doctoral program. What I can say is that it's difficult, but it can be done. And maybe between the different experiences that are in the room and other people that I know, I think everyone brings some level of struggle and hardship because of their life circumstances, and whether it's children or families or financial responsibilities, etc. And hopefully some inspiring experiences that it can be done, and that maybe the timing is a question, maybe the how, the when, with what supports and all that. But I will want to encourage anyone thinking about it to not discount the idea of pursuing a PhD because of those barriers, but actually maybe engaging people that have overcome some barriers and trying to think about how could I do this, and how it would have to look like. Maybe it's not this December I'm applying, maybe next year, maybe I'll have to clear this thing or change this thing, and if, keep knocking on doors, because there are more supports there than I thought that there would be. And concretely, one of the things that played out for me is that when I was applying, this was 3 years ago, our stipend has actually increased significantly because of the unionization. it was actually much lower when I applied, which is being a big difference. So at the time, there was a diversity fellowship that made a difference. There was another program that was offering the same amount of more money than Columbia, and it was actually, it was financially it was better, but because of this thing that was offered additionally, it kind of made it equal, so made the decision a little bit easier. So in any case, long way of saying, I want to encourage you to think about the multiple ways that you can actually make it happen, even if it feels hard, and even if it will be hard, if you really want to do it.
Thank you. Do we have one more question, T&I, that you want? I know that you're answering some stuff in the Q&A.
Yeah, we have one more question that folks have been asking if how would you all recommend staying involved in research while doing direct practice after MSW graduation? And there are some other questions that are currently being answered by our panelists as well.
So I guess to answer the other one, because I have these kids and I know it's no joke, and I'm gonna let you know, once you get into a program, the kids will act up, life will happen, kids will get sick, mess around, you might get sick. All that stuff is gonna happen. I think Oscar had even concluded and he was saying that it's gonna be tough. I was always told, if it's hard, you gotta, if it's gonna be hard, you gotta do it hard. So I think that's the key. In knowing, even now with the stipend being as good as it is, I still have to work, because I got 2 kids in private school, and these bills, they don't stop. But because of that, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just your trajectory might be a little bit different. So you might not take you may have to take one less class and try to make it up over time. Or you might not be able to do all the readings. I mean, I don't think anyone does all the readings, but I digress. I think you just may not be able to do as much of all of the readings that are given to you. And you just have to be transparent with folks. Try to let people know where you're at, what you're going through. And the beautiful thing about being in social work education is that you're typically taught by social workers, and instinctively we want to help. So because of that, you're in the nurturing environment. So it's not like biomechanics or something like that, where folks may be a little bit rigid and you can't get the support that you need. I think if you're communicative with people and you let them know, then they'll make it work. The key is at that point not to be hard on yourself. And as I'm speaking to you, I'm speaking to myself, because when I do reach out and they're like, "Oh, it's no problem," then I'm like, "Ah, damn, I feel bad," because, but that's just the way your life is. And again, you have to do it so that you can be of service to your family, like Kevonyah had mentioned before. And then to answer the other question about how can you stay involved in research while in the program, if you go to schools like R1 research schools or 1A research schools, whatever the name is for it is, if you're getting a stipend, you're gonna have to do some type of research assistantship. So with that, your mentor, you'll continue to be in the field and you'll continue to be doing some research. So you won't be too far from it, especially schools like Columbia where research is the big thing.
Mm. I want to thank you all. I'm hearing a part 2. But I think you all are also accessible via email. And if anyone would like to reach out to Yi and Oscar and Ash and Kevonyah, please reach out to them, to myself, to the Action Lab. We're going to definitely have a part 2, probably in the spring, and maybe getting a little bit into like the nuts and bolts of applying and all of the questions that are coming up. Great questions. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to thank my colleagues again, T&I and Erin and Mary, for being here. And I hope that this was information that you can take with you in your own journey, wherever that takes you, whatever program, whatever school, whatever job, whatever your career is. We hope to offer more opportunities to have discussions with one another. Thank you all. I want to thank my panelists. And have a wonderful, wonderful day, everyone.